Hello there! This video is about a workshop map I made based loosely off the gameplay of the Hitman series where you must infiltrate a building, find weapons and assassinate the target, and then escape. Download links in description or comments just in case anyone's interested. The concept began its life earlier this year after I played a bit too much Hitman Blood Money and wondered if it were possible to recreate some of its mechanics in Counter-Strike. I'd planned to test out my ideas on a small boxy map, hoping to make a proper map for it later if they proved successful. So on this testing level, there were some point entities and triggers designed to control the way the CT bots behaved based on the player's actions. So, the bots would initially be peaceful towards the terrorist whom he play as, but should he use a weapon or enter a restricted area, they would begin attacking him with increasing force, although if left long enough they would eventually return to peaceful. However, even when not angry they would still follow the player around a bit too much, as if they were trying to pressure you into confessing your crimes or something. That little glitch aside, I was surprised at how well this works, and unlike most of my logic systems it wasn't too temperamental, and only used a small handful of entities in total. The next revision saw a refinement in the mechanics, as well as some brand new ones, including the ability to disguise as a guard. All you have to do is press the use key on the clothes rack and your player model will become a CT, and from then on the guards would ignore you when you enter a restricted area. Next gen stuff, huh? Of course, the CSGO bot AI still saw you as an enemy just as before, but using bot and score players, I was able to prevent them from following you quite so much. Oh, and this also contained my beautiful design for the target. What a lad. So now, with some mostly functional mechanics, I just had to make a map for it. Easy, right? Still containing my usual levels of imagination and creativity, I decided it would be best to ask my friend what to base the map on. He suggested a sort of palace or mansion in a Mediterranean South Europe. Now, it's worth noting that most of my previous maps have been set somewhere in the UK, mostly because I feel it's a bit underrepresented in map pools, with most of them being set in either Germany or America, but I digress. Logically, I told him that he's thinking a bit too ambitious of me, and because if my channel's shown one thing, it's that I enjoy disappointing people. Then immediately started research to make a Mediterranean mansion anyway. Now, it seems to me that many aspiring mappers get the perceived notion that detailing is quite a difficult skill, and while to an extent this is true and there are people who have mastered the art of it out there in the world, for the most part you can get away with just copying areas based on pictures from the internet and filling everything else with lighting garish enough to hide or at least distract from the generic boxiness of all the brushwork. It's not like reality is going to sue you for plagiarism now, is it? So that's exactly what I did. There isn't really a time-lapse to be had here, as I did about 2/3 of the house in one sitting. I'd even go as far as saying I'm quite proud of it, generic boxiness aside. Version 2 saw the rest of the building essentially complete and a basic level of detail and foliage to the surrounding areas. The lighting inside is meant to give off a sort of warm but more subdued feeling to contrast with the bright sunlight outside. By version 4, the actual gameplay had been implemented. All that was left to do now was add some challenge, and extra detailing, and a basement, and a radar. So version 5 saw most of that added. The basement area contains a keycard essential to getting to your target, but admittedly doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why is there a room only accessible by vents? It also seemed a bit counterproductive to force the player to shoot to get there, angering any nearby guards, just to progress. I'm going to skip version 6, seeing as it was a bit dull in terms of changes, but version 7 is what I'm happy to call the definitive one. It not only contains more detail and polish graphically, but also reworked the basement so it can be accessed without alerting the local law enforcement, added HUD hints to help players get accustomed to the mode, and a custom multi-level radar in the style of Hitman Blood Money's, which took ages to make but I'm very proud of. Although the 3D skybox is basic, it goes some way to make the map feel like it's an actual place rather than just a house floating in the void, which is always a plus, right? I mean, sure, the trees look like they belong in a horror movie, but I'm sure we can look past that. There's also weapons scattered across the map, some in plain sight, others shamelessly hidden secrets, and by now I think the gameplay has been well balanced. I mean, it's quite difficult, and even skilled Counter-Strike players might have some trouble with the bots if they decided to go for a frontal assault on the building, but it was designed this way to try and encourage players to take the stealthy option. I felt if there was little challenge involved, the players wouldn't experiment and explore the map as much, instead just rushing to the finish line with no payoff. Although the downside to this, naturally, is that the workshop community tend to prefer simple aim and practice maps, and I didn't know whether they'd invest their time into beating my game mode. However, after the release of the map, it seems I need not have feared. It gained upwards of 10,000 downloads in the first few days, which was pretty incredible for me as none of my previous maps had come close in terms of popularity. I'd received tons of feedback and ratings from the community, and it currently sits at almost 90% upvoted. This comparative success has taught me a lot about mapping in the workshop. Nobody seemed to want to play my aim or defuse maps, as there were thousands of others doing the same thing. But I like to think this map was something a bit different for the community to play, and as such got the opposite response. If any other amateur CSGO mappers are watching this, I urge you to think outside the box, or at least the box of what is considered standard on the workshop, and think about what other sorts of modes or ideas could be made with the tools at hand. If you haven't had any previous popularity on the workshop either, why not see what you can do differently? But that's all for now. I'd meant to do a results video on the poll from last time, but seeing as most of my efforts recently have been to that game I'm working on, you can have the rundown now. We had 120 votes, which is pretty damn impressive for a channel of this size, that so many people care about its direction and want their opinion to be heard, and I also want to say thank you for all the lovely comments you guys sent me. Surprisingly, the majority of about 66% voted for anything, regardless of game or topic, which again is awesome because I didn't expect so many of you were in this for me rather than just the wacky Counter-Strike videos and bad microphone. 3% of the votes wanted me to ditch Counter-Strike entirely and move to other videos. I mean, personally I'm surprised that got any votes at all, but I guess everyone must get bored of the game eventually. The second biggest group of results wants mapping videos, which I guess makes sense, seeing as there's a fairly significant overlap between my audience and 3Clicks Phillips, who has world-class mapping tutorials and I'm sure he's helped many people to get started in Hammer, me included. Keep in mind I don't really plan on doing tutorials as such, at least not in a similar fashion, but I like the idea of giving tips and advice for parts of the process like detailing etc. where there's no set way to do it. Finally, 15% wanted me to stick to just Counter-Strike, which is a tiny bit disappointing for me, but still far less than expected. However, I'm taking these results with a pinch of salt. I believe it's fairly safe to assume that the 1,000 plus subscribers that didn't vote have subscribed mainly for the Counter-Strike videos, so to depart from them entirely wouldn't make a lot of sense. In the meantime, however, many thanks to everyone who voted, but now the video's over. Now go! Be free!